you clicking?
Oh, can you hear that?
I can, but it's not a big deal. I'm wondering what you're ferociously clicking.
I'm DIYing a bunch of stuff in a row on Animal Crossing, and in order just to
I'm
keep the
glad I have
train
your
going,
full attention.
I have to click through it. There we go. All right, done.
Nice.
I know. Oh wait, did I get? Oh, well, that's excellent.
Wow.
Again, I remember too that somebody saw this movie and they were like, "Do you know what would make this movie better? If Chris Tucker was white." And they were like, "But who's the white version of Chris Tucker?" And someone was like,
Wow,
"Owen
you want
Wilson."
me to be Chris Tucker? Wow.
And then they also made two movies, Shanghai Noon and Shanghai Nights.
Unbelievable.
We should watch those movies and compare and contrast.
I don't want to. They can't be better than these movies.
Wow, you're Chinese?
Rush Hour is so good.
Wow, can't you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Wow.
Hello and welcome to Subject to Blackout. As always, my name is Timo, and with me yet again from the Name Taken podcast is Mike Marshall. Mike, how are you doing tonight?
Good, Tim. Feeling more spirited than last week, especially because we just watched Rush Hour.
We just watched what can only be called a cinematic classic.
Yeah, among the best buddy cop movies of the 90s.
Well, we're getting to high praise fast, and this movie deserves it. This is by far one of my favorite movies from my childhood. This movie, when it came out in 1998, when I would have been approximately age 11, and from that moment to this evening when I rewatched it, it remains one of my absolute favorite, just kind of schlocky movies.
It's fun. Yeah, this is fun. We've watched a lot of movies that were fun sort of in spite of themselves, but this sets out to be fun and is fun in the way that it intended to be fun. It's like
Correct.
The first movie we've had that I think actually managed that.
Yeah, I would struggle to say that this movie holds up, because there are definitely some parts that are of a time. And
racial.
Yeah, that's the constant racist comments in this movie.
I mean, it's hard for me to evaluate for on one, having lived in China and spent time in Hong Kong. There's a part where Chris Tucker's like, "Yo, it's kind of looks like where you're from," and I was kind of like, I mean, it does. He's not wrong. It looks exactly like where. Yeah. So
I was like, you're probably racist for saying that, but unfortunately, you're
he's right. Yeah. A lot of stuff looks like that, and not just temples, restaurants and
I gotta be honest. I said, we've both said, this is a great film.
Yeah.
Because it's just so lovely. But I didn't think, something that I had forgot when watching this was that this is also the movie that coerces Jackie Chan into saying the N-word twice. Two times.
Yeah. Do it, Jackie. It'll be hilarious.
Which is a luxury 1998 could apparently get away with. It is definitely not something that could happen in the year 2021. But that's what makes this. It's sort of the nostalgia you have for your uncle who's racist. It's like he says such outlandish things that it's almost funny. And that's kind of what happens with Rush Hour. It's just And I kept writing this in my notes, and it's just the 90s exclamation point. Like, and to
Yeah.
me, what that ended up being was just like, this movie clearly couldn't be made today, and it wouldn't be made today, at least certainly not in the way that it came out in 1998. Not in the version that happened. But I'm so glad that it did.
Right. I think, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think probably, I mean, the idea of having a black act, like a black lead with an Asian lead is probably still challenging for some aspects of Hollywood. So I think in that sense, it was like a more progressive approach to casting. This is like among the most diverse cast of movies I kind of remember from the 90s. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, obviously, a very large portion of the cast is Asian of some descent. I would assume mostly Chinese actors. But I mean, your main white guy is either the evil main character Jun Tao, who
Right.
is literally a colonialist. Like,
Yeah.
he's literally just a British guy.
Yes, we don't like him.
Or it's one of the like shitty FBI agents.
Yeah, shitty FBI agents, and I don't know if you recognized. So this was the case for me watching Mystery Men, where the whole time I was like, oh, that guy. And I wrote this one down for Rush Hour. So when I saw the FBI chief, I
Yes.
was like, oh, that guy who rapes Tim Robbins in The Shawshank Redemption.
That's what he's from. I was watching it this evening and I was like, that guy's from something else that I recognize. And I'm like,
he raped Tim Robbins. Yeah.
I was like, is it Beverly Hills Cop? Is he literally just one of the cops from Beverly? No, you're
Tim
right.
Robbins.
He rapes Tim
He
Robbins.
sure does. Yeah.
You just
So
rapes the shit out of him.
It's got that guy. It's got a deep bench. We got Chris Tucker, Jackie Chan, guy who rapes Tim Robbins.
The guy from Star Wars who's J.J. Abrams' friend who's like, hey, remember the Emperor? Because we didn't bring him up, but we're going to.
That dude.
Tom Wilkinson, who plays Jun Tao, the bad guy. I don't know what the character's name is before he reveals himself as Jun Tao, but Tom Wilkinson, another fantastic character actor who does not overplay his role. And the bad guy is both believable and really well acted. I thought the fact that he doesn't play like an overarching like evil character. He plays a guy who like went to China and tried to exploit, the fact that he could acquire some of their art on the down low. And then when that gets stolen from him, just as like, okay, well, I just want to get paid for it. Like that's believable. And this all takes place under the transfer of power from England to, or from Britain, rather, to China of Hong Kong in 1998, which I think is both an interesting point in history to frame this story, which was accurate to the time, and is also very interesting under the current relationship between China and Hong Kong.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Oops.
Well, there were a handful of things. Having spent time in China and also having kind of like a familiarity with Chinese cinema from doing voice acting and dubbing of Chinese films for a number of years, that I noticed in this. But a lot of the movie is an homage to Hong Kong cinema, which is really where Jackie Chan got his start. I've dubbed some of Jackie Chan's movies from the 80s in Hong Kong. And a lot of the extended fight sequences like very much reflect the type of choreography he would have been doing in Hong Kong movies. So like in that sense, it was really, really cool to kind of see that whole tradition of filmmaking being brought into this new kind of like American environment. Also, at various points throughout the movie, Jackie Chan speaks both Cantonese and Mandarin.
Really?
Which I didn't expect, actually.
Now, and that's one thing is a lot of his most important lines and a lot of the villain's most important lines in the films when spoken in a foreign language, which I don't know which is which or when is which. Um they dub them, but I did know there were, and I like this about films when they do this, is like lines that were implied are not dubbed. Like at one point, Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan have gone into a restaurant in, Little China in Los Angeles or whatever.
Right.
And they've been spotted. And like, instead of dubbing like, hey, you go over there and you go over there, like they just start speaking in some foreign language. And it's not dubbed because it's obvious that he's giving orders to his henchmen, his co-henchmen.
Yeah.
And I was thinking at the time, I was like, I wonder if Mike understands what he's saying here. And not just like specifically in that scene, but like in other bits and pieces where they're saying things or Jackie Chan is saying things to other, Chinese characters. I wonder if they were like dog, cat, tree, or if they were actually saying what you would understand them to.
It was like a pretty standard dialect. There were a couple of times where I noticed somebody who sounded like they were Taiwanese, but for the most part, it was like a pretty standard, like non-regionalized dialect. Yeah, for the most part, the languages matches up pretty well to the subtitles, but there were like a couple instances where like the details are a little bit different, or like the color of what they were saying is a little bit different that adds some nuance. The scene you're talking about in particular was "Bring Him to Me."
Nice.
Yeah. Which doesn't get translated, but
it does not get translated, but
as an extra element.
But yeah, that explains why they just kind of allow him to enter the facility.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed this, but did you see when the title of the movie gets name checked?
That's one of my favorite parts about these films is there are 3 of these movies, and according to Wikipedia, in 2017, Jackie Chan agreed to a potential script for a 4th movie.
4. They're kind of old, man. I mean, like, I looked it up. Chris Tucker's 49. He's younger than I would have expected him to be.
That is.
But he's still too old, I feel like, to be in this movie.
I don't feel like Chris Tucker's in fighting shape at age 49, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I like that they were kind of, like, youthful or whatever. Jackie Chan's older, man. Jackie Chan's way older than 49. Yeah. He's got to be in his late 50s. Did you know that? I didn't know this, but there was a Rush Hour TV show.
I did know about that.
What was that? What happened? What were you guys doing? I was away. You made a Rush Hour TV show? You tried to franchise this?
I didn't make anything, and we're getting far away from the point. It felt like a money grab, and I'm sure it was. But, so my favorite part about the fact that there are 3 and potentially 4 of these movies is that the entire name of this scene is just based off of like a throwaway line by a bad guy who's just like, sorry, Rush Hour. Like, Rush Hour has nothing to do with any of these movies, but it was such a catchy, like, boo-boo, like, it just sounds good when you say it, that they just kept it, and it's now Rush Hour movies, even though, again, has nothing to do with anything.
I would like to set up and explain that scene, because there were 2 scenes in particular I was like, that was weird. But so this is one of those movies that utilizes this trope where like the key villain, who's a Chinese dude with like bleach blonde, like rave hair, at 2 points kind of dresses in a disguise, and people just kind of like are like, I'm sure he's exactly that. So the first one was when he was dressed like a cop and pulls over that car. And they're like, why did you pull us over? And he was like, oh.
Is there a problem, officer? No
yeah.
problem.
And then he shoots them.
Just Rush Hour.
I was like, okay, that wasn't an explanation for anything. So that was weird.
And that's a movie franchise now. That's a multi-million-dollar movie franchise because they chose the line, just Rush Hour.
Yeah, they're like, that's it. That was the moment. And then the other thing that I thought was like a really bizarre scene, towards the end when that woman is disarming the bomb vest that's on that little girl.
Yeah.
First of all, by the way, when terrorists make bombs, they don't follow a standard like color code. Let's just talk about that
Mike,
for a second.
you gotta go by the color code, okay? Because if you
No.
gotta undo the bomb vest and you're incapacitated, somebody's gotta know which wire to cut. Okay? So you go by the universal bomb code.
So yeah, so this movie follows that, like, there's a universal bomb wire code rule of movies. But while she's remembering what like wire to cut, she says like a roses are red poem, but she says it in like a really creepy way while she's just kind of like making eye contact.
Yeah,
with
she
the
looks
girl.
up
like
and
that was not a bedside manner.
She looks up at the little girl and is like, "Sugar is sweet, and so are you."
Yeah, like, are you murdered? Like, is someone gonna die?
And then she just
What's
cuts
happening?
the red wire, which has nothing to do with
That's fine.
sugar or sweetness.
No, it didn't follow the poem.
You know
at
what it does
all.
have to do with, though? Pedophilia.
Rush Hour. Yeah, sure. There it is. That's what this movie's really about.
God damn it, it's about the
cautionary
normalization. No, I did, not to delve too deep into that topic, but I did find the relationship with Jackie Chan and the little girl, Su Young, to be a little bit, like, when it first opens up in the movie and she, like, cutely punches him in the stomach and he doesn't flinch because he's Jackie Chan, and you can't punch Jackie Chan without him always knowing he's going to be punched and being prepared. I was like, don't know how I feel about a grown man having a loving relationship with someone else's daughter. Like, that's a little weird. But the movie kind of, especially in a movie directed by Brett Ratner, and that's all we need to talk about Brett Ratner, but the movie kind of floats by and just skims the surface of that relationship enough to just make it not creepy. But boy, when that movie started, I was like, oh no, is this going to be the thing that 1998 me didn't understand was not going to be okay in the future? But they pull it off.
When do you think the trope of the FBI just sort of like sucking at and obfuscating everything started? Because like that trope is like alive in this movie, where basically the entire reason the FBI exists is to like prevent anyone from doing anything effective and to make everything more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, their whole objective after the building explodes appears to be cave into the terrorists. Like, they don't actively seem to be seeking out the criminals involved once some of their agents get exploded in the building in the, first act, second act. Once that happens, they're just like, we'll give them the 20, or the $50 million or the $70 million. Just get out of our way. And it makes Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan's characters seem like they're the only ones who are actually trying to hold anyone's feet to the fire, which, for the movie obviously works, but doesn't make any fucking sense as far as the FBI goes.
Mm-mm. Also, remember too that the child that's kidnapped is the daughter of, like, not the ambassador, but the West Coast consulate ambassador. So we're not talking about like the ambassador of Hong Kong to the United States. We're talking about the like head of the consulate in LA. They have like an office in an outlet mall in real life. They don't have like
Don't
this
have a
like
mini
elaborate
mansion?
fucking mansion.
Yeah.
They don't have a mansion. And also, like, let's say, for example, because I think the implication they were trying to make there was that there was like an embassy. Like, there's not an embassy in LA. If there was, would a foreign country like China invite the FBI just to traipse around the grounds and run an investigation? Probably not.
Was it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't there an incident where a Chinese diplomat house, because I don't know the correct term for it, in Houston just started burning a bunch of stuff a couple of years ago? And that wasn't because the FBI was helping to solve a crime and they needed to get, like, they just were like, we need to ditch whatever is in this pyre right now. Yeah.
Happens.
Yeah. The podcast can't hear you nodding, but you're nodding in agreement.
I'm nodding. I mean, there was that stuff happens. When I was in China, this never got around. I think this was in 2019. But there was an explosion outside the American embassy.
Yeah,
which I can verify. I lived very close to the American embassy. No one ever found out about that. There was like news about it for like 2 or 3 hours, and then it all disappeared. But stuff like that happens. Things get set on fire at embassies. Documents get burned. People try to blow stuff up. People scale things.
I saw Argo.
You don't hear about it.
It's not just China. It's us too. Speaking of the consulate Han, he seems like a good dad.
He seems like a good dad. Yeah. I mean, this movie does feature a lot of, like, to its credit too. It definitely incorporates a number of actors from Hong Kong cinema. Like, I've dubbed several of these actors. So it's not just sort of like pulling in random people from the United States. It's like, it's kind of in the same way that Harry Potter was like, we're going to rely on British actors and not just have, Americans do the voices. Like, this movie relied on a pool of like talented Chinese and Hong Kongese actors
and it's obvious
to drive that aspect of the story forward. And they did. It was a great choice. And it was awesome, like I said, to see them incorporated into like an American cinematic tradition.
Now, Consul Han is acted by, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, Zima. And I'm sure I've seen him in other things since then, but he's really good in the role. I think he plays, obviously they sort of hint at the mother is no longer in the picture, presumably deceased. Yep. And he plays this man who's struggling to hold it together while his daughter's gone. He plays the role really well. And then when he tries to bring in his own man, Jackie Chan's Chief Inspector Lee. When he brings in his own guy, Chief Inspector Lee, like, he obviously there feels like a built-in relationship there. Now, is he one of the actors you're talking about who was in Hong Kong film?
Him, and also in that scene, the two guys who end up dying, the two drivers that are driving his daughter.
Yes. All right, so I have another question for you. Again, you lived in China for the better part of a decade.
Yep.
And so I'm sure you can answer this question better than I can, but is the first gong hit when Jackie Chan exits the airplane in LA, is that racist? Because the second gong hit, when he reveals that he speaks English, is hilarious.
First of all, Jackie Chan knew English, just to be clear, at this point too. So Jackie Chan is acting like he has no idea what English is. So he's actually like, he's playing up an accent. Here's my issue is that, like, Americans having lived in China for 10 years, I can tell you that Americans have a very difficult idea believing that there's a world that exists outside of their own racial and identity politics.
What? No. Us? Come on.
I think the things that China and would identify as being an issue in this movie are not the same things that an American would identify. So I think rather than the way an individual is treated as like a representative of their race, I think China would probably be more upset about the way like Chinese cultural artifacts were treated. And also the way that like antiquities and antiquity trade was treated. So like the scene that I think China would have been really upset about was a terracotta warrior getting its face blown off.
Yeah, it
So
just kind of casually does.
right. So that's something that I think China probably would have been pretty upset about. And honestly, like I think aspects of that are why it's been difficult to get a Rush Hour 4 because Jackie Chan is pretty pro party and pretty pro mainland China. And I have a feeling that he's expected a particular script that reflects a type of Chinese nationalism that I wouldn't say was present in Rush Hour 1 or 2. I've actually never seen 3.
There's a reason we're not going to review it.
Yeah. So that's my impression, but like in terms of the like the Orientalism and those sorts of things, like China has its own version of like European Orientalism. They have like white people stuff. You know what I mean? That's just sort of like an amalgam of anything that could be like American or, you know.
Well, to the point
European.
where China has built like planned cities based on like European like cities.
Yeah, and there's some amusement parks that have reconstructions of like different types of landmarks. So you don't actually have to go to those places. You can just do them in China. You know, like the same in the same way that we have like Epcot. It's like China has Epcot, but it's just to visit like Western stuff. So
we built an Eiffel Tower in Las Vegas.
Right.
Like,
they built
we're
one
not immune to it.
Yeah, they built one in Shenzhen. So like,
well, wasn't it like 1-to-1 scale? Because the one in Las Vegas is not 1-to-1 scale.
And China likes to be as good or better. So yes, it was 1-to-1 scale. But yeah, so in that sense, like those are not issues that China would have had a problem with. The stuff that China and like the Chinese nation would have had a problem with are definitely different. Within America, I can see how those things would be issues. But outside of America and in China, there are different sets of concerns.
One thing that I was shocked to learn as far as Asian American culture goes is that apparently in 1998, Panda Express existed.
How about that, right?
Yeah, there was a reference to Panda Express by Chris Tucker, threatening to drop Jackie Chan off there. And my biggest takeaway was like, holy shit, Panda Express existed in 1998? I had no idea. I still have never eaten at a Panda Express.
No one was even around then. I'm trying to think of other details. I mean, like a lot of the stuff that I wrote down are literally quotes, including, like I said, hang on, let me turn on my light here. There we go. Can you read that?
Wipe yourself off. You dead.
It's like, gotta bring that one up.
I thought it was interesting that at no point in the film did anyone put an APB out for the only Asian person with blonde hair. I felt like that was a real missed opportunity by the FBI because just the one guy had blonde hair.
And like a really distinctive scar.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that, you know, hey, arrest and harass every Asian with blonde hair, but like maybe start questioning blonde-haired Asians because there don't appear to be many in the movie. There are lots of Asian people, but just one. And then it occurred to me halfway through the movie a thought. And the thought was, listen, we know the director of this movie is not a great guy and may, you know, bastards may be people who think people are stupid. And my question was, did the main Asian bad guy get a unique hair color so that the audience would know which one he was?
Oh, what an interesting question. There was that one moment in the movie where I mean, this is going to come up like a million times in Rush Hour 2 because it's in Hong Kong. But there was that one point in the movie where Chris Tucker loses track of Jackie Chan in a crowd, and then they kind of like play on that like the trope that you're referring to. But
that they all look the same, which is not true.
I know how podcast editing works. I know you can make me say a lot of things, so I'm not gonna say that loud because you can edit me to sound like this is an OAN. But so again, I said so the blonde Asian villain who looks extremely distinctive and has like a distinctive facial
Yeah, they
scar.
give him a facial scar.
Right. Has a disguise first as a cop. Okay, fair enough. And then the second one is after everyone's been looking for him and they've actually positively identified him. Then he gets into the event that they're supposed to be guarding as like a
waiter.
bartender.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, how did the FBI not screen? How did the FBI not screen for these people?
Hey, we're looking for a blonde guy with a a circular scar under his left eye.
Yeah, actually, he just looks like your bartender. How long has he been working for you?
Oh, yeah, no, he was hired by Juntao over there. Oh, shit, he's Juntao.
Yeah, which didn't happen, but could have happened with only like 4 seconds of investigation.
Also, does Juntao mean anything, or is it just like a name?
Names are different in Chinese. Like, names use a lot of unique characters. So without seeing the characters, I can't definitively say which one Tao means.
Okay. That's racist.
I can say that it's despite him being a Hong Kong resident, it's a Mandarin Chinese romanization. So Hong Kong and mainland China have different ways of spelling things in English. So that was unique. Jackie Chan is a Hong Kong style of romanization.
Without getting too deep into the woods, like can you kind of like generalize what a difference is? Because like his name is not Jackie in China. No one's like, whatever Jackie. It's definitely something different, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember his name.
Don't worry about the pod. I'm just generally interested in what people call Jackie Chan in China because it can't be Jackie.
No, I think his name in Chinese, it's Chun or Chung. It's Chung Long, I think, is his name in Mandarin. So there's two systems of romanization. There's the Wade-Giles system, which was developed by like the British Empire when they held Hong Kong, and they also held like pretty epic kind of like shipping and trade rights in a number of different port cities, including Shanghai, right? And so that's the system that you'll recognize as being like Chinese food in the United States. So like chop suey, that's the Wade-Giles system. Like egg foo young, right? Mushu, those are all like the Wade-Giles system, and they're also like largely referring to Cantonese. The Mandarin version is called pinyin, and the types of vowels that they're using are a little bit different. And they're, I'm trying to think of like another kind of like a really distinguishing feature. I mean, really like the way that they're utilizing vowels is really different to try and replicate certain types of sounds.
Okay.
If you see like the way I kind of think about it, I'm trying to think about whether this is true. Yeah. Like if you see a W at the end of something, it's the Hong Kong version.
Okay.
Like a chow, like the Mandarin, like the Northern romanization would have been like a OU instead of like an OW. Or like another good example is LEE is the Wade-Giles system, and the kind of modern pinyin, the Chinese system, is LI. And but they're both Li.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Juntao is pinyin. It is not the Hong Kong system, which is interesting that the villain had mainland ties. I mean, I guess it's not interesting. Those are Hong Kong's politics, or they were.
But I mean, reflecting in modern times, it's interesting that a movie didn't kowtow to,
Weijia system. Good job.
Yeah. Kowtow. Is that an Asian thing? Kowtow?
Yep. Yeah.
No idea. You could have told me that was fucking French.
We have, I mean, chow as like a slang term for food comes directly from Chinese diasporic communities in the West Coast that were working on railroads. Chow is food or to eat in some Cantonese kind of dialects. And the phrase "long time no see" is a direct translation from Chinese.
It also sounds like you're kind of impersonating a Chinese immigrant when you say it.
Yeah. It's 好久不见. Yeah.
You learn something new every day.
Right. There you go.
All right, Mike, let's take a break here and we'll be right back with more. Here's what we got coming up in the next few weeks on Subject to Blackout. Mike and I will be watching Rush Hour 2, finishing off the series as far as we're concerned, because we're going to skip Rush Hour 3 and go directly to something very different, the 2004 indie classic Garden State. And we continue to hype what's coming in June, the Furiously Fast Film Fest, where Mike and I will be delving deep into the Fast and Furious franchise for the first time. We hope you join us for that and more at Subject to Blackout. And as always, you can reach out to us at subjecttoblackout.com. All right, Mike. There were a couple of things that kind of, again, felt a little out of place in this movie that was otherwise perfect. One of the things is there sure is a lot of sexual harassment at work in the LAPD.
Yo, yeah, HR.
I mean, he keeps asking very inappropriate questions of his partner, and she just keeps helping him and not reporting him to HR.
Did HR exist at that point?
Oh, HR has existed for a minute.
Right.
But yeah, when he asked what color her panties were, I was like, well, that's definitely a line. That's definitely a line that got crossed.
Also, hang on a second. I need to look something up here. I'm trying to see who associated with New Line Cinema has been canceled.
Brett Ratner.
Like, there could be some reasons for those lines.
Yeah, the reason for those lines is Brett Ratner.
Right.
Who, again, we don't have to talk about. But, I mean, not to put too fine a point of it, but Brett Ratner has his gross perverted fingers all over the script.
He does not have a very, like... If you look at his picture on his Wikipedia,
Boof.
he looks like a dirtbag.
Yeah. Clicked on that earlier this evening and was like, yup, he definitely did all the shit he's accused of.
He did that shit.
Beretta did that shit.
Yeah. Wipe yourself off, man. You dead.
You dead. There also was the G14 super classified line, which then the movie assumes immediately that the audience is too dumb to realize that that's bullshit, even though it's the most bullshitting sounding bullshit that ever bullshitted. And they have the sidekick FBI dick be like, G14, that's a good one. And then they just cut away from it and just been like, hey, audience, in case you were too stupid to get it, this isn't super classified. But then they immediately give away the ghost and tell Chris Tucker, like, hey, we're wasting your time. Just like, follow Jackie Chan around and make sure he doesn't get into our business. So why bother telling him 30 seconds earlier that it's G14 super secret?
I have a feeling some of those things came in the more time I've been spending with media and editing all these things, like there was some idiot at a test audience that stressed out a producer. Do you know what I mean? Some idiot at a test audience was like, I didn't understand this. And the producer was like, well, I'm as stupid as this person and you have to go to reshoots and include this thing that's unnecessary for literally everyone. And they were like, okay. That's what happened. Like, there's no way, because I agree with you. It was totally just crammed in there. That's how it happened.
Wait,
like fight me on
wait,
that.
why?
It's totally how it happened.
Why doesn't he want to do the FBI job? He wants to be in the FBI. And you're like, guys, reshoots. We got to do this.
Yeah, and then like the producer was like, "Well, this stupid person asked a question." Like, and they're like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Well, I'm stupid too. Like, why can't you answer this question?" Great, sure, yeah.
And the
like,
movie
that's not even our
suffers for
demographic.
it.
We're not even going for this demographic. All right.
It was a 92-year-old woman who her first language was actually Romanian. She's like, I don't understand. Like, well, we got to cater to her. She's a 92-year-old woman from Romania. That's the audience we're going for. Yeah, no, that makes too much sense. I also thought it was very funny that during the initial Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker get to know each other scene or series of scenes where Jackie gives him the slip and ends up on the double-decker tour bus.
Yep.
That after Chris Tucker jumps on the tour bus and confronts Jackie Chan then grabs onto a Hollywood Boulevard sign that is clearly not attached to the light pole, and in multiple shots for many seconds, we can see the crane that is actually holding up the Hollywood Boulevard sign.
I mean, thank God, he would have gotten really injured otherwise, right?
I was so confused as to why A, they didn't cut around the giant crane that they hired to hold up the sign, or B, that they made no effort whatsoever to seemingly cover up the fact that they put this sign on a crane.
I don't remember looking at the crane, but like I completely believe you that was that, like, you know, remember too that this was like a 90s movie and there are just kind of like details people were like, whatever.
There was stuff when you filmed on film where you only found out when you started editing, like, oh,
you can still see,
the crane's gonna be in this shot.
Right. That stormtrooper bonks his head.
We can't go back. Like, that guy died 3 weeks ago, so we definitely can't go back and refilm that. But yeah,
did you notice that this soundtrack did everything it could just to like avoid like the standard Oriental riff? Yeah. It like did everything it could just to like not do that.
It felt like someone was actively like, you know, playing all the instruments at once, and they were like, da 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 da. Oh no, let's just stop there. like, at multiple points, it was like, this is very Asian, but it's not, you know, not yet.
The Oriental riff, yeah, it's not turning Japanese. I really think so.
I do have to say, though, I don't know how old Jackie Chan was in 1998, but I am 33 years old, and in the opening scene where he jumps off of the boat, and that is clearly him jumping off of a boat about a story and a half down to the ground, and he just sticks the landing, and he's clearly not landing onto it. If he's landing onto a pad, he's not landing onto a thick pad because he proceeds to start like running. My knees fucking hurt watching that. And
yeah, you never really hear about him getting like injured, do you?
No, and he's such a consummate professional. And the thing about this that, again, going back to me taking notes during the film of just like 90s exclamation point, this movie would not be made this way, not just because of the, you know, racist remarks or sexual harassment stuff or whatever. Just like 90% of those stunts would just be CGI. You know, there wouldn't be a real boat. He wouldn't be jumping down. There'd be like 6 cuts on that jump so that he would only actually have to jump in the air and land. And they would just cut it to make it look like he jumped a story and a half. But like he actually does that shit. And like the commitment to the fight scenes is what takes this movie from a buddy comedy to something just more. Because it really shows the love and care that Jackie Chan brought over, and this is not for every American, but for many Americans, this is their introduction to Jackie Chan and the Hong Kong cinema. And this is a loving, crafting effort to Americanize what he had been doing over there for, decades. And I think it really shows, and it really brings, imagine trying to make John Wick without the amazing, immaculate gunplay that is done by the actors and stunt people. Like
gun fu, if you will.
Yeah, it's not the same thing. And the care that they take in all of these action scenes to just do it on film and do it live, and it just makes the movie so much better than it has any right to be.
I agree. And honestly, too, like the way the kind of like culture of acting has changed too. Like if they were to make this movie for the first time in 2021, like they would just get like an ass double. Like there would be no kind of like full Jackie Chan ass scene.
Yeah. Jackie Chan has an ass scene?
Does he?
I don't know.
Now you're wondering. You're like, did I watch that? Maybe you did. I don't know. He was so confident. Did I miss it? Maybe.
I don't know what ass scene you're talking about, but I'm gonna have to rewatch.
Now they would just like pick a younger person. They would CGI. Like it had run in. Like Andy Serkis would come in with like a suit on. They would just CGI in. Not 1998. They're like, here he is.
All right, Mike. I think the last thing I have to say about Rush Hour is this movie was so good that it invented Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I saw that. I like right before we talked, I was doing a little bit of research. But yeah, why don't you talk about that? That was interesting to me. I had no idea.
I had no idea. As you just said, I was doing some research prior to coming on here, and as it turns out, the review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes was invented by a large Jackie Chan fan. I mean, he could be any size. He's a avid Jackie Chan fan. And I'm sure butcher this, but Sen Duong.
That feels right.
It says on Wikipedia that he was inspired to create the website after being a fan of Jackie Chan's Hong Kong action films. And right before Rush Hour released, again, kind of being the introduction of Jackie Chan to American audiences, he coded and built the Rotten Tomatoes website in 2 weeks and created Rotten Tomatoes. So this movie has changed cinema forever, not just in that it brought Jackie Chan and high-profile stunt artists into the forefront, but that it also created the aggregating system that every movie is held accountable to, including Citizen Kane.
Yes. Yeah, suck it, Citizen Kane.
Paddington 2, better than Citizen Kane. It's official.
I wish Orson Welles were alive to see this.
He's a Paddington 2 fan, so he's like, I get it.
Let me ask you this. So, has watching, in the same way that dude was inspired to make Rotten Tomatoes, has watching Rush Hour inspired you to make anything besides this podcast?
No.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
However, it has inspired me to watch Rush Hour 2 next week, which, as we said in the middle of the podcast, we are covering next week. It's streaming on HBO Max if you want to watch it. Rush Hour 2, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's one of the better sequels of the era of films that it came from. And I think it does what all sequels should do. It takes the basic structure of the first, kind of inverts it in some way, and expands upon it in other ways. And that's what you want out of a sequel is don't retread everything, but just definitely say, do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth a second time? Maybe flip the character though.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So before we watch next week, which do you think is your favorite right now? Without rewatching Rush Hour 2 yet.
Without rewatching Rush Hour 2, I think the first one is probably better. I think, and again, I haven't seen Rush Hour 2 from beginning to end in a good long while, but I did watch the first hour and a half a couple months ago, and it's a tight film, and I think the action scenes might be better. But considering that the movie immediately takes place canonically, immediately following the end of Rush Hour 1.
Right. They set it up really well, too, with the plane flight.
I think the first one just kind of has a more coherent plot. It's more believable in its plot that these characters have long-standing relationships in Hong Kong, and then they move to California, and then Chris Tucker is introduced. Like, all of that kind of jibes. But I feel like the relationship in the second one feels like a close-knit relationship between two old friends, and in the story, they've only known each other for maybe a couple weeks. So
that's an interesting thing that I wouldn't have thought about. But yeah, you're right. I'm going to take the opposite approach here. I'm going to say that Rush Hour 2 is going to be my preferred one of both, but let's find out next week.
I'm interested to see. All right, Mike, now's the time in the show where we normally discuss other media and pop culture that we've been consuming, and I guess this week I will go first. I have recently delved into what used to be the DC Apps show, but is now on HBO Max, Doom Patrol.
Oh yeah, Brendan Fraser.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet. I read the comic book. I have not seen the show.
So I've heard nothing but good things, and I came to it because I was looking for something to watch, and I had heard that Doom Patrol was basically, as it was described to me, was a better version of the Umbrella Academy that is on Netflix, which is sort of like a misfit group of superheroes controlled by an eccentric old guy. And while there are definitely similarities between the two shows, I think I actually prefer Umbrella Academy on Netflix. But what got me to start watching this was I had heard good things about Brendan Fraser's Robot Man, and Alan Tudyk is a legend. And his turn on the Harley Quinn cartoon on HBO Max as the Joker, I would put up there with anything Mark Hamill has done with the Joker. Like it's really it's that big. Good. And Alan Tudyk in a litany of movies and television shows has just been fantastic. I mean, the guy's a legend. So his role as the big bad Mr. Nobody definitely intrigued me, and I was told was really excellent. I got through the first season. I have only started episode 1 of season 2. It's good, and I don't regret watching it. But outside of Brendan Fraser and maybe a little bit of Timothy Dalton, Matt Bomer's Negative Man, it does some very interesting things, and Alan Tudyk is just chewing scenery, which is what I would hope he would be doing. But outside of that, I just little underwhelmed by it. It feels a little paint by numbers outside those characters. But I've enjoyed it. I look forward to watching season 2, and hopefully it just keeps improving. Is there anything that you've been consuming recently, Mike?
As far as watching goes, nothing new. Still watching the OC, HBO Max still, and I'm listening to the companion podcast by Melinda Clark and Rachel Bilson. Welcome to the OC, bitch. They're on episode 3. I'm on episode like 17 or 18 because I didn't have any self-control. This isn't like The Mandalorian where I'm just going to wait for 1 a week. I'm just going to pound them.
Now, the podcast...
This is the way.
The podcast that they started is like currently like only on episode 3?
Right. So the podcast is to the actors from the show going back and doing a rewatch of the entire series. Like one episode a week, but they're also bringing in, people who were involved with the show, like not just to talk about the individual episodes, but also, to talk about the cultural impact. So that's been fine. I mean, I also spent a huge amount of time playing Pokemon Snap, and that, that was something that I've done with my time that I don't regret.
We all make choices.
I did.
All right, Mike, I want to thank you once again for joining me for Rush Hour. I enjoyed it immensely.
No problem. Super looking forward to Rush Hour 2.
Like Mike said, we are doing Rush Hour 2 next week. And following that, Mike and I are going to be revisiting 2004's Garden State, the Zach Braff and Natalie Portman vehicle. I recently revisited this film a few months ago, Mike, and I got to say I was surprised how well it held up, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
I'm very curious. I'm very, very curious about that one. I haven't touched that one back since I had a
It was an important movie for a lot of people of our generation, especially because of how seminal the soundtrack was.
We're going to have to evaluate not just the movie, but the soundtrack.
Correct.
We have to listen to this. Yeah.
But I gotta say, I went into my rewatch recently hesitantly, thinking that the film would falter and not live up to expectations. And I have to say, I don't want to set a high standard, but I was very pleasantly surprised with how good the movie remains to this day.
All right. I hope so. We'll see.
We shall see. Well, Mike, as I said, I want to thank you again for coming out. And as always, you guys can find us on all the social medias, except Facebook. You can visit us on YouTube, or you can always reach out to us at subject@blackout.com. Mike can be found at the Name Taken Podcast. Mike, thank you again for joining me.
Cheers, Tim.
And as always, have a good one.